Hello, hello. Welcome to Dial In, the podcast about customer service, AI, automation, and everything in between. I'm your host, Gadi Shamia. I'm the CEO and co-founder here at Replicant, the company that automate customer service calls at scale. Been in the contact center space for about a decade now. Previously at a company called TalkDesk, now a $10 billion company in the contact center space. And then my follow-on journey to Replicant. I'm very excited to have a very special guest here, calling directly from Savannah, Georgia. I would like to welcome Elizabeth Adams to the podcast, and maybe you can share with us a little bit about your role and how you got roped into AI.
Oh, well, first off, thank you so much for having me. Yes, I bring you greetings from Savannah, Georgia, where it is sunny today. And I appreciate that. So I've been in the technology space for over 2 decades. I've led large-scale initiatives and large teams for Fortune 500 companies and for the government. And about 7 years ago, I began to see how AI was impacting certain communities, negatively, in fact. And those would be vulnerable populations, communities of color, marginalized communities. And I wanted to find out why. And I also wanted to kind of take the years of experience that I've had around tech inclusion and advocacy and see if I couldn't make a difference somehow. So I basically followed my curiosity and I started researching what I was hearing. And then I started having learning events. And that led to one thing, it led to another, it led to a couple of Stanford Fellowships. It led to work in the city of Minneapolis, being immersed in working partnerships between community and policymakers around shared decision-making on AI-enabled technologies. And then it also evolved into the current world that I'm in, which is where I advise executives on adopting and operationalizing responsible AI practices, adopting an AI culture. And through my doctoral work, I study leadership behaviors, decisions, and experiences around responsible AI and how they are engaging employee participation in that. So lots of things that I've been a part of, but it's all been very exciting.
So I'm actually going to throw away my first question out of the window because I have a one I want to ask you first. You talk about how AI can and did, in fact, negatively impacted weaker populations, around you. And we've been thinking about it for a long time, and we actually felt pretty good about our part of the world because we automate customer service calls, and the bots, we call them a thinking machine, are blind to accent. They're blind to intonation. They're even blind to what some people perceive to be angry tone versus polite tone. So all those things that are coded in our brain, they just listen to words and the words that are said and respond accordingly. And respond accordingly actually in a pretty structured way, which kind of leveling the playing field for everyone that calls, assuming they can enunciate at least 70% fine. Like they don't even have to have perfect enunciation and accent. How do you think about that? Is there actually an opportunity here that with more calls run by conversational AI and automation, you actually creating a more level playing field for every caller versus only the one that can speak in a Stanford accent?
Yeah, I think that that's interesting, and I would be happy to unpack it in a little bit more detail. But where my work comes in is I think about everyone regardless of their physical ability. So can they even reach you? Do they have the technology to reach you? Do they have the means to connect with your bot? Does your bot have the patience for how slow someone might talk or speak? And then what is the customer's wait time? What is the empathy that the bot might offer to that person who's been sitting there waiting to get their issues resolved? So there are lots of different ways that we can think about the end customer, but it really starts with having different personas and specifically, those that you might think that might not ordinarily be the ones that would show up to get the service, if that makes sense.
Yeah, so I want to actually dive for a second about what, because I will obviously see the benefits of using AI for customer service. no wait time, use a phone, which is a very democratic tool. Everybody has one, doesn't matter what their income level is. AI is, of course, very patient because it's just a machine. It has all the time in the world. And it doesn't really prioritize anyone based on accent or education. So I can see all the benefits here, but I don't want to be blindsided to what can be the downsides. So what in your mind, we kind of think of this experience can be a downside, something for us to watch for, or for our customers that use our technology to watch for?
Well, I think a couple of things. Let's start internally. Let's start with, are your employees a part of the design and development of this new AI coworker? Do they know what is being shared? Do they know what answers are being given, so that if the customer opts to speak to someone live, they have that detail, they have that information, and they're not starting from scratch, right? And so then when that customer is able to treat that customer, they can treat them with empathy and dignity, understanding that they've already had an experience before they got to them. So that's a part of organizational learning and development, and upskilling and reskilling, and making sure that your staff is able to support them. Now, from the customer perspective, again, I think about my parents who were seniors, and they spent a lot of time on the phone. I don't know if they were talking to a bot. They would call me when they would say, this machine doesn't understand what I'm saying. Trying to get through to someone to handle their phone bill. I've also had challenges with online bots with trying to get service as well. So I think we've got to think about who in the population should be calling. You made a reference that everyone should have a phone. Maybe they should, but maybe there's another way that they could interact. Maybe they can't hear or they can't speak. And so what are some of the other options for these customers as well?
Yeah, and you brought a lot of really interesting points, and of course we also offer chat and other means and SMS, but you definitely offer a lot of interesting points around the experience of this caller, and how they feel to treat with respect. So maybe talk about this a little bit. What's the role of these machines when it comes to speak with respect, empathize with the caller, and where do you draw the line between being fake smile of a machine, and being more authentic, owning the fact the machine is a machine, but also show empathy to the caller?
Well, I think there's evolutions, right? As technology evolves, your technology gets better, but starting off with empathy, and I can share a personal experience. I called my phone company, my mobile phone company. Well, actually, I started off using their chat bot. And after 20 minutes, I became very, very frustrated because they just kept repeating the same answer, and I didn't feel like I was getting through. Now, I consider myself a pretty good prompt engineer. I use ChatGPT or other generative AI tools, so I've become very good at how to get the answers that I want. Well, in the transfer, I got a transfer to a person who had no information about any of that particular call.
That's so frustrating.
And so here I am starting all over again after spending 20 minutes waiting to speak to a live person. And then even that person was not as equipped to go in. They spent 20 minutes trying to get my permission to even access my my information. And so there are all of these steps that I think from the inside of an organization that could really pay attention to, like maybe have some of your employees use the product themselves, call in and see. So hopefully that answered some of your question.
Yeah, I think you touch on maybe what's the most important thing to respect a customer or caller, which is respecting their time. I always think that this is the most important thing that our customers give us, is their time when they call customer service. And if you don't respect it by half an hour hold, or by transferring them to an agent that will have to ask them to redo the whole previous call, that's just really disrespectful, regardless if you're rich or poor or educated or not. And I want to touch on the empathy still, and this empathy point. How would you draw the boundary between trying to pretend to be a human and showing a lot of empathy to really be clearly a bot? We see companies that decide, most of them call their bots in female names, which to me is always a interesting and unpleasant point. Why, if you decide to name a bot, why is always a female? Why we're kind of leaning into the stereotype? But also even the question of naming a bot feels unauthentic to me, versus calling it a bot and maybe leaning on what can be a bot empathy. So what is this bot empathy in your opinion?
Yeah, well, first off, transparency. So making sure that the person knows that they're speaking with the bot and that they're not trying to be human. And I think that that should be a clear distinction so that I immediately know that I'm not talking to a human and I'm going to talk to some computer that is translating what I'm saying and presenting something back to me. But even just the empathy in the words, in the language that is being used, and not making it so obvious that it's just the language that was developed by a certain few developers, right? So you have other, I don't know, vernacular that other maybe communities used. But really that empathy is in understanding and training that bot on appropriate language where you don't have to try to be human, but you can kind of mimic some human characteristics such as, thank you for your call. I'm sorry that this experience isn't what you want. There's certain phrases that I think could offer someone, or maybe even de-escalate a situation where a person has been communicating with a bot for 20 minutes or so. And then there's the dignity piece. So the digital dignity, which is really, again, what we talked about is making sure that your bot is inclusive. So maybe there's nothing wrong with having a woman bot or a bot named a woman, but also maybe other bots that look very, very much like the communities that you're reaching or the clients or customers that you're reaching. So there are many opportunities, but from the research that I've done, it really starts with stakeholder participation, internal stakeholder participation from your employees, as well as external stakeholder participation from your clients.
Yeah, you're bringing a really interesting point. Like I keep thinking about new questions that are not in my plan, which I think is just more interesting to me. At least I'm entertaining myself. Hopefully, the listeners as well. How do you think about? You mentioned tone of voice. So one of our customers is serving predominantly truck drivers. It's the biggest truck stop in the country. Where others serve restaurants, and most people that answer there tend to be, 10 years, 8 years in school. Many immigrants are answering the phone in restaurants. Do you think that and the canonical start is the voice of the bot is the most Polish, with the most appropriate accent voice, even if it's casual, but it will be an appropriate accent neutral, relatively accent neutral machine. Do you think, and your research indicates that it's better to speak with the truck drivers as if you're a truck driver and better to speak with a restaurateur as if you're a restaurateur, or it is okay to stick with its canonical, well-understood, all-American voice, for example, if you're in the US?
Yeah, so my research doesn't get down to that particular level. My research is all about inclusion in the design and development so that your output is representative of those things that you want and that your clients and your customers want. So whether you're talking about algorithms to determine mortgages or facial recognition technology, or bots and customer service, involving the people who are most likely to be impacted by your technology should basically be kind of 101. Does that make sense?
Yes.
And so my research doesn't get down to that level. My research is really around stakeholder participation and the behaviors and decisions and experiences around who should be involved in that participation. How are they prioritized? What's their level of urgency and their level of legitimacy? And how do leaders think about that?
Yeah, it actually makes me realize there's so much we haven't researched yet, and we don't necessarily know yet in this new field. So every dart we're going to throw, we're going to find a million things we haven't thought about yet because it's such an emerging technology. So I want to switch to kind of your main focus, which is ethics in AI.
Yeah.
Why does AI from all technologies, just help the listeners understand, why does AI from all technologies need to have ethicists, need to have people think about that? We've been through hundreds of years, 150 years, through the beginning of the industrial revolution, learning and dealing with more technologies. We've been replacing jobs consistently for 170 years by machines in a way that benefit humankind by and large. But now we have this new technology that emerging in the last 7-8 years, and there's a great need or great community around it that deals with AI and ethics. Why is this technology special?
I don't think it is special. And if we think about the history of technology, we've always had quality control. We've always had people who were around to help safeguard, to make sure that the technology was free from harm to the public or whomever, whether we're talking about the airline industry or transportation or some other particular technology. So we've always had it there. The challenge that I see with AI, or maybe the opportunity, is that when you think about the history of technology, usually when you have an industrial revolution, it takes maybe 60 years and then 40 years and then 20 years. And so you have an opportunity to catch up. You have an opportunity for the general public to build skills, to be able to support that new revolution or wave. We're in the sixth wave of innovation. But with AI, that time frame is closing. So whereas we had 60 years or 40 years to prepare and adjust, now we have 2 and 3 and maybe 5 years. And so because of that, we also know that the people who are designing the technologies are bringing their own biases to the development of that, whether it's the narratives that they have about a certain group of people, or maybe they don't have exposure at all, or maybe there's unintended consequences, like you're excluding a certain group of people who could help shape that. And so these technologies are being built without that kind of regulation that we might see in other technologies. And so we're asking the companies themselves to build in these safeguards, and many of them are not. And so what's happening is humans, real life humans, are being impacted, and their lives some are being turned upside down because this technology isn't regulated, and because those who are designing it are also not considering the second and third order consequences of their technology. So prior to history, we've had regulations and quality control around that, but with AI, it's happening so fast. Things are very quickly impacting and turning lives upside down. And so we need people like myself to sound the alarm. And some people do it as what I call a tree shaker, like they're out there in their own way, calling out some of these unethical practices. And then there are people like myself who work with executives as more of like the jelly maker. Let's build the processes and the procedures and the frameworks and the guidelines to support ethical technology design so that we're not harming people and people can thrive as a result of this technology being in the marketplace.
Yeah, so your main point is it's moved so fast, we know so little that we just don't have enough time to iterate, and therefore the urgency or the need for more supervision is a product of speed, because it just doesn't allow time to react. And I often think about, I thought about what you said about bias and how the designer of the system bring bias in. And some people might ask, why is it worse than how it was to be before? You call a customer service agent A is have some bias towards the population. They will treat them poorly. Agent B is like from this population, will treat them well. The reason is that when you train one machine to answer all calls, or one machine and make all mortgage decisions, now everyone gets the same treatment, which is a great opportunity if you do it right. We can eliminate bias from the source instead of training every single employee, but it's also a great danger, because if we haven't done so, everyone is going to be harmed.
Well, let's think about what we're using to train the AI. It's usually data, and that's where you have to start. So no matter what you want your AI to do, where are you getting your data from? Who's annotating it? Are you procuring it? Is the source that you're procuring it from, do they have responsible data principles or data governance? How is it being aggregated? So all of these things happen way before the life of the algorithm takes place. And it's equally important, even so more important than I think some of the human bias, because then you have, this double whammy. You've got the data that was historically incorrect to begin with, that you're training a model on, and then you have an annotator or a data associator adding their bias, and unbeknownst to some person in the public, they have no idea why this algorithm has denied them something. There's no recourse. When they call customer care, as I mentioned before, some people have not been a part of that organizational learning. They don't know why the algorithm is making a decision. So we have all of these possible impacts along the life cycle that can be addressed with the right viewpoint and with the right perspectives and with the right inclusion.
So where are you on the argument of self-regulation, which is seem to be what you do more, how you call it, the jelly making, and government regulation for AI? It's something we've been hearing about a lot in the last few months.
Yeah, so I wouldn't say that I'm on the self-regulation side as a jelly maker. I just know that my lane, I've always been in the corporate spaces, and that's where I work well. But my work in Minneapolis was really around leading a coalition of shared decision-making around AI-enabled technologies that govern society. And that resulted in a ban on facial recognition in Minneapolis as a result of that vendor not being transparent, not having algorithms that were explainable and trustworthy, and then that technology, and then the thresholds were so low that anyone could be misidentified using their tool. So for me, I do think that we've had enough time to see organizations regulate themselves. And what we see is they'll go to Congress and they'll say, oh, yes, we believe it, but then they're laying off their responsible AI teams, or they're not putting enough budget around the ethics of what they're doing. So unfortunately, that means that the government is going to have to step in to safeguard humans, because in my work, the communities that I work with and the employees that I work with are out here advocating for what should be a basic human right, and that's living with safe technology.
And do you think the government understand this technology enough to regulate it, or what need, and I'm sure the answer is no, so what need to happen for governments, because especially in the US, a lot of the burden is on local governments all the way to cities, and maybe much less so on the level of the federal government. So what do governments need to do? And you work with one, in order to build this knowledge and really be effective in this. So it doesn't look like the hearings for Facebook when members of the Congress ask questions that are clearly dumb.
Yeah, I think it's a lot of people need to become educated. I've been immersed in this for the past 7 years, but just basic everyday citizens also need to become educated. And so in my work with the city of Minneapolis, that was a constant opportunity for us, was this continuous education. I think partnerships, partnering with local advocacy groups, partnering with academic institutions, partnering with possibly industry, but also embedding tech enthusiasts and ethicists within the government as well, maybe through fellowships, maybe through interns, maybe through, there's something that United Way used to do where they used to borrow their executives to nonprofits, and then that organization could have someone on staff to kind of teach them about how to run the business. Very similar type of scenario. Governments could bring in these executives from companies or academia, and there'd be these shared partnerships, but no one can do it alone. We can't go at this alone. We are in a new way of thinking and living and developing technology. And so all hands need to be on deck, and we need to build, from my opinion, more partnerships.
Mm-hmm. It actually reminds me that 20 some years ago, I was still in Israel, and this is before the infamous Y2K bug. And I, as a 20 some years old, organized a group of industry leaders that will advise the government. And with a chutzpah, we literally wrote to the Minister of Science that we are here, all these executives from tech companies, and we want to help you to weather the storm if you want to get our help. And shockingly, they said yes. And we gave our time for a full year and a half advising the government, and we're people that from Microsoft and Oracle and all this big companies. I was in a small startup, but somehow I had the idea. Mm-hmm. And I think this model is really effective. And if somebody would have asked me now, hey, would you spend a few hours a month supporting your local government on AI? I would say, hell yes. Mm-hmm. And I'm sure many will do that. So this model is something to definitely need to be explored.
I think it also should include academia as well, because the researchers are the ones who are asking the questions through qualitative or through surveys to understand what is happening. And then that knowledge can then be shared with government policymakers and help them understand how policy strategies should be delivered. So not just industry, but also academia, as well as civil society.
So what's the opportunity with AI? And we care a lot about customer service, so maybe get yourself in the shoes there. We've seen decades of technology that were designed to deflect customers. Hey, don't look here, go to the website and make their life harder, not respect their time. As you noticed, the biggest issue here. And AI, I think, could do much better now. We already see it doing much better. But what's the promise? What's the positive side that AI can bring, especially for customer service?
Well, AI can take massive amount of information and help you understand your customers better. When do they call? How long are your customer care folks talking to them, or the bots? Like, just getting some basic analytics about that customer experience. So if you want to lessen the time, maybe they're spending 5 minutes and you want to get it down to 2 minutes, AI can help you analyze all of this data, which I think is important to do. In other aspects, I mean, we've seen that AI is able to help uncover some types of medical conditions. I think from our large language models, it's helping us democratize AI. People who live in rural areas or people who don't have the same access to technology can now use these large language models like generative AI to build business processes and business proposals. So in the same way in the customer care space, it can write scripts for you that your organization then can tailor. Right. And I said, and one of the things that I love about what AI can do is if you have a deep knowledge in a particular subject and you ask one of these chat GPTs or BART a question, you can immediately tell whether or not it's right? But it can also improve your writing, improve your thinking, and improve the way that you're interacting with the world. So I've seen that, I've used that, and I'm excited about that part, as long as it's done responsibly and being designed with the responsible principles and practices.
Mm-hmm. So if you're now advising an Acme company, maybe it's imagine a big insurance company that talks with company like Replica and want to automate customer service, which advice would you give them? What should they take into account in their journey when they move from no automation to automation?
I would want to know what their use cases, and why do they think that they need AI to do that? So that they're not just jumping on the bandwagon. I would also caution them to ensure that anyone that they're working with has AI principles in place, or that they can work together to build those AI ethics principles. I would also want to know who in that organization are considered the influencers and who are making the decisions about what AI products and services are being developed, like what is their lived experience? And are they thinking broad enough about it? And so basically, when I come in, I'm just listening because I want to hear from them about what they think about AI, what they think AI is, and whether or not they're even considering responsible AI or the ethics of AI. So for me, that's where I start with use cases and understanding who are the major players in the organization, and are they representative of the clients that they serve, the customers that they serve, or the partnerships that they want to have.
And one of the ethos of our company, actually, it's you have all these founding stories, and actually one of our founding stories I'm probably proud of the most is that when we were just testing this technology, it was very new in 2019, and like running a full conversation on the phone between a machine and a person was science fiction at the time. Now it's become more and more common. We got a prospective customer that said, hey, I'm actually helping older people to get Social Security benefits, and there's a whole regulation around it. And we kind of listen and said, oh, this sounds great. We will call people that call you, pre-qualify them, and then pass them to your certified agents if they qualify. And we start running this proof of concept at the time. Was literally our first customer. And my team comes back and said, it sounds like most people did not know they're going to get this phone call and they're confused. So we're listening to some calls, and we actually see this true. The majority of the callers don't really understand why they're being called. They feel confused. I pick up the phone, call the person, and he said, yeah, actually, these people don't call us. We buy lists, we call them, we try to solicit them. And we thought about it for a little bit, and I told him, we actually don't want to continue working with you because you're going to use this really powerful tool And instead of now being able to have people calling them, which is you'll be limited by your resources. Now a machine can make as many calls as you want. We don't want to participate in that. And he's like, I remember him telling me, would you tell your board you decline $1 million of revenue, which is what this deal would have been when your revenue is zero? And I said, yes, I would. And I'm very proud of my board because I went to the board at the time and said, we're going to give up $1 million in revenue where we had zero because we don't want to be in this unethical use case. Because I don't think I'm going to build a good company this way. It was not even for the greater good only. It was also because I knew it's going to change the company. We'll poison it if we're going to start dealing with questionable use cases. So I relate to it a lot. The tool is so powerful that if you're not thinking about that, you can just make bigger mistakes that you cannot make when you have people just one by one using the phone.
Yeah, congratulations for that. Because I know that as a leader in this space, that takes courage. It takes courage because your employees are depending on you. They're depending on the vision that you set forth, and they're depending on every decision that you make, every email that you send to do the right thing. And they're depending on you so that they can feed their families and feed themselves. And so it takes a lot of courage to face that and say, I'm going to go in a different direction. So kudos to you for that. If more organizations did that, I could go off and hang at the beach. I could be doing some other things.
It can work from the beach anyway. It's kind of fun. So we're wrapping up, and I want to introduce our last segment, which is the speed dial, which I'm going to ask you a few questions, quick, like one sentence answers, maybe just to get to know you more. I'm going to maybe make up some questions as well. So the first one is, what's your morning beverage?
Definitely coffee. That's not exciting, but definitely coffee. How
do you drink your coffee?
I like cream and the sugar substitute, but I have an espresso, and so I like designer coffee. I love it frothy, and yeah, I just want to wake up to a great experience, and that gives it to me.
As my wife always say, coffee is coffee is my meditation in the morning. Preparing it and serving it is my meditation in the morning. I don't know how to meditate, but coffee is my meditation. So imagine the customer service agent of the future, knowing that AI is going to be much more prominent. Which personality traits or skill sets they will have to be successful?
Communication. They're going to need problem-solving skills, critical thinking skills, empathy, and adaptability for all the reasons that we've talked about before. But also they're going to need a moment so that they can have some downtime, because thinking about splitting themselves and splitting their brain in all these different ways to meet the customer demands, they're going to need an opportunity to reset as well.
Yeah, it's such an important point. What's the high point in your career, a point where you said, wow, I arrived, or I know I'm doing what I'm doing, it feels great?
I've had several. I've been fortunate, but one that stands out was when I took an opportunity to run a systems integration lab for the government, 200 employees, multi-million-dollar effort. I was familiar with project management, but I had no idea that I'd be running such a large team. And it was such a high point because that's where my leadership skills were strengthened, and my philosophy around broader stakeholder involvement came to the forefront. I could not have done that job by myself sitting in the office. I had to depend on people who were a lot smarter than me, hundreds of them, in order to design and deliver technology products for the warfighter. So for me, that let me know from that day forward, from that time, that there's nothing I can't do. And I'll try to remain humble here, but I know that I am that girl.
So if you're not that girl, if you're not doing what you do now, what would you have done? What's a completely alternative career that would have satisfied you?
Singing. I love to sing. I actually left the corporate space many years ago.
You know what I'm going to ask you to do now?
Nope. To move to Beverly Hills to...
Can we find you on YouTube or something? SoundCloud?
No. Nothing's out there.
All right, singer.
That was my dream, and I had the opportunity to go live it for a year out in Beverly Hills, and loved it. So yes.
Amazing. One of my good friends, she's CEO of a company in kind of the fashion industry, was a singer until she was in her mid-30s and sang all over the world, and then decided to be an executive, and she's an amazing exec. So I can see how you can do both.
Yes.
On the spectrum, AI will destroy the world or will do amazing thing for the world. Where are you on the spectrum?
I'm in the middle.
That's a
I'm
good point.
encouraged by the number of people that I see stepping into this space to make sure that AI doesn't harm, but I also know that there are just people who are just curious by nature. I know people that will go and ask generative AI some very dark things, or they want to play around with some dark things. So there always are going to be dark actors in our world, and I am concerned about what AI can do in their hands.
Yeah, I totally. I'm more like you. I can see the benefit. I have some medical researcher friends that made breakthroughs in the last few months with generative AI just by understanding proteins and things like that, and they're so excited. And I can also imagine how it can be used in a negative way. Again, great power, great responsibility.
Yeah.
I think that's probably should be your tagline. My last question is: now being in this podcast, anybody you think is a great AI thinker, it should be my guest.
Oh, so many people. Well, one person I would say for sure. Are you talking about for customer care?
Yeah, but just as interesting AI thinker about customer care or anything else. Somebody you would like to listen to.
I like Renee Cummings. I could listen to her all day. She just has this way of sharing perspectives that kind of touch my heart and my intellect at the same time. I think she's a phenomenal person, Renee Cummings. She's a professor at the University of Virginia, and she's also a criminologist and AI ethicist. And she just has a way. She's just good. I love her. I think she's amazing.
I'm sure she'll listen to that. Elizabeth, thank you so much for joining. It was a fascinating conversation, and thank everybody for dialing in. So again, thank you for your time. You were very generous with it, and thank you for everybody that listened for their time as well. Until next time.
Thank you so much.